Grey's Anatomy is once again using its platform to spotlight a real-life medical issue, this time, peripartum cardiomyopathy, or PPCM, a rare but potentially life-threatening form of heart failure linked to pregnancy. The storyline unfolds as Dr. Jo Wilson experiences what she believes are normal third trimester symptoms while pregnant with twins, including extreme fatigue and shortness of breath. Doctors soon discover her heart isn't pumping effectively, revealing a diagnosis of PPCM. According to cardiologists, PPCM typically develops late in pregnancy or shortly after delivery and can be difficult to diagnose because its symptoms often mimic common pregnancy discomforts. These include swelling, fatigue, palpitations, and shortness of breath. However, warning signs such as severe breathlessness at rest, sudden weight gain from swelling, trouble breathing while lying down, or worsening symptoms should never be ignored. The episode mirrors real-life cases, including survivors who describe sudden cardiac collapse during or after labor. Many patients, like those portrayed in the show, require intensive care and mechanical heart support, but the outlook can be positive. With early diagnosis and treatment, most people recover fully. Season 22 continues this theme of resilience, showing Jo on the path to recovery while her premature twins remain in the NICU. The storyline also reinforces a crucial message echoed by medical experts and survivors alike: advocate for yourself. If something feels wrong during pregnancy or postpartum, speak up. Hey, lovely viewers, welcome to our channel Grey's Anatomy Official. Grey's Anatomy highlights rare pregnancy-related heart condition, what to know. A recent storyline on Grey's Anatomy brought attention to peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM, a rare form of heart failure related to pregnancy. PPCM can look a lot like common pregnancy symptoms in the third trimester. Most people recover with early care, that's why it's important to advocate for yourself when you feel something isn't right, as one mom who went through it stresses. In a recent episode of Grey's Anatomy, Dr. Jo Wilson learned that what she thought were common symptoms of late pregnancy, especially with twins, including shortness of breath and fatigue, were actually signs that her heart was struggling to function. Her doctors soon learned that her heart muscle wasn't pumping effectively, a sign she was battling a rare but serious condition called peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM. PPCM is a sudden weakness of the heart that develops around the time of delivery, related to the pregnancy itself, explains Lily Barouch, MD, a cardiologist and associate professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins University. It's triggered by the end of a pregnancy, she explains. What it's like to experience peripartum cardiomyopathy. After 36 hours of labor, Gould was preparing to deliver her baby boy when she remembers everything went black. There were shadows behind everything, and nobody else could see it, except for me, she recalls. I felt a really horrible sense of dread in my chest. I grabbed my doctor's arm just out of nowhere, and I said, I'm gonna die. This is it. I'm about to die. While there was no apparent reason for Gould to feel that way, her vitals were normal. It was at that same moment that her son's heart rate dropped enough for the medical team to rush her into an emergency C-section. Because her epidural wasn't strong enough, Gould had to be put under anesthesia, and her son, Archer, was born healthy. But when she was waking up in post-op, the then 33-year-old realized she couldn't breathe. Within a minute or two, they lost all my vitals, says Gould. I had no oxygen, no heart rate, no blood pressure. And they kept trying and couldn't get it. So, the ICU was called and cardiology was called, and then, I crashed. Gould's medical team at Atrium Medical Center in Warren County, Ohio, deduced that she had PPCM. My doctor had to decide whether I needed a heart transplant or if they could try the Impella, a device that provides temporary mechanical support for the heart, says Gould. They ultimately decided to at least try the Impella, which allowed my heart to rest. The major part of my recovery was having that. And then, they put me into a medically induced coma to allow my body to rest, and my heart could rest, and the Impella could do its work. 2 days later, Gould woke up, the Impella was removed, and her heart was able to take over. Following her near-death experience, Gould was left shocked and numb as she navigated life as a new mom who had just experienced cardiogenic shock. What are symptoms of PPCM? Peripartum cardiomyopathy is when the heart chambers enlarge and as a result, the heart muscle weakens, explains Randy Gould, a cardiologist with Manhattan Cardiology in New York City. What can make PPCM difficult to diagnose is that symptoms are also par for the course during the third trimester of pregnancy. Common symptoms are shortness of breath at low levels of exertion, swelling of the ankles and legs, fatigue, and palpitations, says Nika Goldberg, MD, a board-certified cardiologist in New York City. But many times, swelling at the end of pregnancy, or right after, is normal, especially if someone had a C-section, says Dr. Barouch, adding, and everyone in their last few weeks of pregnancy feels kind of short of breath, because the baby is squishing up your diaphragm. That said, you want to look out for swelling or shortness of breath that's glaringly out of proportion to what's normal in late pregnancy. Severe shortness of breath, like you can't even walk around the room, is not normal, says Dr. Barouch, who adds to also be on the lookout for shortness of breath when you're lying down on your side, or a cough, paired with shortness of breath, that begins when you're lying down. Swelling that keeps getting worse or sudden, and alarming weight gain are also red flags of PPCM, says Dr. Gould. Although she had an otherwise normal, healthy pregnancy, Gould recalls gaining 20 pounds in her last month, noting, that can now be attributed to just pure swelling from my heart starting to fail. Dr. Barouch adds that palpitations or feeling like your heart's out of rhythm can also be common in pregnancy but might also be a sign to see your healthcare provider. Grey's Anatomy Season 22 Episode 9 Recap. Weber fights against a second opinion. It all starts with everyone listening to Teddy's interview that was mentioned in the previous episode, and this opens the conversation between Catherine and Weber. Naturally, Catherine wants Weber to get a second opinion from a doctor Weber doesn't pay the paycheck of, and that leads to Catherine sharing she already called a doctor. Meanwhile, we learn that Jo is making a full recovery. She focuses on the downsides of her daughters, but Link tries to keep her spirits up. Things take a turn when she realizes that Winston and her favorite nurse, the OBGYN's favorite nurse, have been out a few times. Jules deals with a role-playing patient on Grey's Anatomy Season 22 Episode 9. For Jules, everything starts with a call to the A woman comes in with someone who seems to be her doctor, or maybe her husband who happens to be her doctor. However, it turns out that the two just like to role-play, and the husband isn't a doctor. The leg pain definitely is real. Meanwhile, Bailey goes up to the tumor board to see if she can get help for treatment for a tumor patient. The tumor is benign, but it's a tricky situation and the patient has coded on the table twice while at Seattle Press. The tumor board isn't interested in the risk, except for Owen. He doesn't have any idea on how to deal with it, but he's ready to tackle the situation. Maybe he's encouraged by the success that Teddy has had. Bailey and Owen need a miracle. Weber and Catherine meet with Laura, and she quickly gets into the details of the cancer. The good news is that Weber has caught it early, and she thinks the best treatment is to remove the prostate. However, Weber isn't interested in this, focusing on the downsides of the surgery, such as stroke, and it's understandable. To be fair, Catherine railroaded him into this, and she knows what it's like to want to deal with cancer on your own. However, I will say pot meet kettle. Bailey goes to her tumor patient, Lydia, with the mixed news. While the tumor board says no, Owen makes it clear that he wants to help. It's time for them to co-work on a plan, and Lydia wants to do it. Her wife may not be completely on board with this, but Lydia convinces her to give it a try. Jo heads to the NICU to see her babies, where she meets with another mom of a NICU baby. Despite knowing about the post-birth hormone drop, she wasn't expecting to feel things the way she is doing. However, this NICU mom doesn't let her focus on that part of things. She wants to know all about the crash C-section. As for Catherine, she goes to talk to Weber, accusing him of only wanting a male doctor. Finally, he brings up that while he didn't agree with her healthcare decisions in the past, he accepted them. Now she needs to do the same for him. Then there's Bailey, Owen, Winston, Simone, and Lucas dealing with the tumor. They all run through options, looking at the different downsides to the options. It's time to find a miracle, and it's clear that the podcast with Teddy has spurred this on for Owen. In the Jules overhears a conversation between Link and Winston about Nurse Iris, and pulls a face, but she doesn't have time to react to it or think about her feelings. Her role-playing couple needs help. The wife Stevie T has turned into something much more serious with the leg now black. Owen gets an idea on Grey's Anatomy. While in the break room, Laura apologizes to Weber, realizing that he never agreed to meet with her in the first place. She does seem to figure out how to work through to his good side, inviting him to help consult on a patient. You just know how that's going to turn out. As Lucas gets another text message from Katie, Simone immediately judges. She doesn't think the conversation is right for a doctor and patient to have, but it's clear that she's projecting, dealing with the fact that she's sleeping with an intern, the intern that caused problems for Simone and Lucas. Bailey figures out why Owen is helping on the case, but she's interrupted from talking with him by Lucas and Simone walking in with bad news. However, all the bad news, Owen starts to get some ideas. What about using ECMO? Owen decides it's worth going to see Winston to see if it could work. It certainly seems like it could be possible, and while it's not been done before, Lydia is excited to hear about it. Sure, there are some downsides, and there could be a problem, but there is a chance that it could work, and Lydia wants to take the risk. Meanwhile, Teddy gets to the bottom of the DVT patient, and it leads to the reveal that Jules and Blue will be doing the surgery. It's time for Teddy to just observe. Laura opens up to Weber. It turns out the NICU mom is seizing, and Joe is sure that it could be eclampsia. Joe gets Link to go up to keep an eye on the new mom, and she'll be able to stay on top of it that way. Of course, not everyone agrees with Joe's diagnosis, but she pushes for the treatment for eclampsia, and nobody can argue with Joe. Meanwhile, Owen and the team start the operation. It's clear that Bailey isn't that happy about the situation, but there isn't much choice here. Everyone else is on board. I still think Laura turned to Weber to get him to listen to her, but it does lead to her opening up about being a doctor with MS. She gets a lot of others to do most of the surgeries, and she works mostly with robotics because of her medical issues. It's clear that something is getting through to Weber that medical conditions don't need to be the end of a career. Elsewhere in the hospital, Jules and Blue practice in the skills lab. As Jules talks about how she's fed up with hospital life, it looks like Blue takes it easy on her and walks out of the skills lab. Jules can have this win. The act ends with a problem in the OR. As the patient's BP drops, Owen and Winston run through all the options that it could be. While there's no sign of bleeding, it's possible that it's something bigger with the surgery. They need to get to the bottom of it, or there is nothing that they can do. Naturally, Bailey is scared about that. Can the doctors save a patient? As Lydia is stabilized, the doctors need to get back on the same page. Owen hands out the orders, but he does turn back to Bailey to make sure she's okay with it all. At this point, they've gone too far to stop. Jules also gets praise from Teddy in her OR. Elsewhere, Laura and Weber discuss the possibility of removing Weber's cancer. It finally comes to what Weber is really worried about. Out of all the side effects, there is a risk of the need of opioids, and that breaks Weber's sobriety. This isn't about fear of the cancer or of actual side effects, it's about what the treatment of those side effects can bring. Back in Bailey's OR, her patient starts to code again. She's able to find where the bleed seems to be coming from, but can they work fast enough to stop it? They manage to pull the tumor out, and now it's time to close her. As for Joe, she gets up to the OBGYN floor, where she checks in on her friend. However, she runs into a roadblock, as she's not the woman's doctor. Iris can't give any of that information, and while a rational Joe would understand that and agree, postpartum Joe doesn't. All she wants to do is find out how her friend is. Weber makes a final decision. Things with the surgery seem to have worked out. Obviously, with Grey's Anatomy, we know not to count out chickens until they hatch, but Lydia makes it out of surgery. As much as Bailey didn't like the idea for a while, she does appreciate how much of a great thing they did. Owen now has some ideas for the residents, getting them out on an ambulance ride-along or something similar. Bailey wants to see a proposal. As we start to wrap up the episode, we learn the role-playing couple are all good, and Lucas and Simone seem to be in a good place with him telling her that while he values Simone's opinion, leave the relationship ones out. At the bar, Winston comes across Jules. The two get talking, but Iris interrupts them. It's clear from Winston that he realizes a little of what's happened, but will that change things between him and Jules? Blue sees that Jules is struggling with the Winston/Iris relationship and makes it clear that Iris is just a stop sign rather than a roadblock. Maybe Jules just needs to pretend to be someone else while hooking up with someone at the bar. Jo gets a chance to open up to Link as she runs through all of the things that she couldn't do. She felt like she was getting her identity again as a doctor, but then someone else took over when it mattered. Weber also takes the time to open up to Catherine, sharing that he is worried about not being able to do surgeries again. However, the idea of death is even worse, so he's going to go through with the surgery. Your official Grey's Anatomy recap, Season 22, Episode 8. Last week's episode of Grey's Anatomy ended by assuring us all that Jo Wilson was going to be okay. We love a dramatic eye-opening from a hospital bed, but this week, she's still dealing with a complicated postpartum situation. She's not the only one facing some complex life moments, though. Heavy on Me sees Richard make a major decision about his prostate cancer treatment plan. Bailey and Owen team up to remove a 35-pound tumor from a woman's abdomen, and Jules ponders if she is too aloof. I guess that last thing isn't as dramatic as cancer treatment and giant tumors, but it is important nonetheless. Let's dig into this week's episode. Richard makes his choice. There's honestly nothing like one of our Grey Sloane docs emotionally declaring that they are a surgeon with verve and feeling, reminding us that's who they are in their bones. This is exactly what Richard Weber does by the end of Heavy on Me. Richard has been through so much, hasn't he? Remember when he had a brain tumor? Or when he got cobalt poisoning from a hip replacement? Or that time Meredith told him he's the reason her mom tried to kill herself and ruined their lives? So much. And now our Chief of Chiefs is left angsting over how he should treat his prostate cancer. Well, I guess it's more technically correct to say he's angsting over how Catherine thinks he should treat his prostate cancer. Richard's already made his decision with his doctor. They're going to wait and watch. He doesn't want any kind of risky surgery. What does Catherine want? Well, she's flown renowned urologist and urologic oncology superstar Dr. Laura Kaplan in from Boston to tell Richard to have the risky surgery. It is Catherine's way. Richard's initial meeting with Dr. Kaplan and Catherine ends with him storming out. Kaplan thinks he should do a radical prostatectomy and have the entire thing removed. Richard knows the risks of that surgery, and blood clots, stroke, and injury to the rectum are just 3 in a very long list. But when he runs into Kaplan doing work in the attendings lounge while she's waiting for Catherine's plane to take her back to Boston, Richard isn't angry with her. Both of them understand how Catherine works. Kaplan apologizes for not realizing Richard wasn't the one requesting a second opinion, and she also wonders if he could consult on a patient she's working on. It seems the two become fast friends. Eventually, Kaplan opens up to Richard about having multiple sclerosis. Getting that initial MS diagnosis was terrifying. She worried she wouldn't be able to operate anymore, and it was soul-crushing. But instead, she came to see her MS as not a career ender but as a career pivot. Her symptoms, like muscle pain and leg weakness, would make it nearly impossible for her to stand in or operate, so she simply found a different way to operate. Now, she mainly performs robotic procedures. She can sit, and she doesn't need to be able to hold a scalpel. I still get to do what I love, even if it is in a different way, she tells him. Her words cut to Richard's core. When he sees Kaplan leaving later, he tells her that he rejected her opinion out of fear. If he suffers complications from a radical prostatectomy, especially a rare but very scary-sounding urosymphyseal fistula, he too might never get to operate again. Kaplan reminds him that she can treat complications, but if the cancer progresses, Richard runs out of options. And that seals the deal. He finds Catherine to tell her he doesn't want to live in fear, and all this time, it was his fear that was making medical decisions for him. He's a surgeon, and he'd be devastated to lose that part of him, but whatever happens, people can adapt. He can adapt. He's getting the surgery. A little inspiration goes a long way. See? Sometimes a person simply needs a little push to do something scary but important. Sometimes a person simply needs a little inspiration. Inspiration, as it happens, is exactly what Owen is missing these days. After listening to Teddy and Winston talk about the innovative aorta surgery they pulled off with Nora on podcasts and the like, Owen is a tiny bit jealous. Teddy deserves all the press and accolades, of course, and he repeatedly wants to make sure everyone knows he's totally fine with all this, but more and more he's feeling like his own work is stalling. He's got a case of the bloss, okay? So, when Bailey and Simone present a patient with a 35-pound benign tumor compressing all the organs in her abdomen, Owen is the only doctor who backs them up. He thinks Bailey can remove this tumor, and he wants to help. It doesn't take long for Bailey to realize Owen's motivations for joining her team might not be totally altruistic, but they are mostly altruistic, and that's good enough. She needs as many brains on this case as possible. The patient, London, has attempted surgery before, but because of the pressure on her heart, she's wound up crashing on the table before doctors can remove even part of the tumor. It's Owen who brings up putting London on ECMO so that there would be no shot of her heart failing in surgery. Good for him. It's unconventional, and London's wife, Charlie, is hesitant, but London doesn't particularly feel like waiting around to suffocate to death. She wants to live. She wants the surgery. Bailey and Owen are joined by Winston, Simone, and Lucas in the OR, and while there is more than one moment when things look bleak for London, the team work flawlessly together and eventually remove that behemoth of a tumor. I hope Owen puts it in a jug and takes it home. London is saved, Bailey is relieved, and Owen is finally getting his medical mojo back. In fact, by the end of the episode, he asks Bailey what she would think about building some type of EMS training or ambulance ride-alongs for the residents so they can learn more about thinking on their feet and get additional trauma training. Bailey tells him to write up a proposal for her. Owen Hunt is inspired again. Meet Jules. Sally. Definitely Sally. Like Owen, Jules Millen is in a bit of a slump. Hers, though, is not of the medical variety but rather stems from her non-existent social life. Jules has always been slow to let others in, a trait that sometimes has consequences like the one we saw her face last week when she dashed over to Joe's to tell Winston that she's interested in him, only to find him having drinks with Nurse Iris. It seems everyone around her is busy with other people they've let into their lives, and for Jules, well, the cheese stands alone. Lucas may not be dating Katie yet, but the two are texting regularly, and he does seem to perk up every time he hears from her. Naturally, this bugs Simone, who admonishes him for an inappropriate relationship with a patient, which is hilarious because she is currently and enthusiastically boinking an intern. Eventually, Simone realizes what Lucas is up to is none of her business, and the two manage to have a friendly conversation about getting Katie movie recs while she's laid up. Are these two healing? I will forever be holding out hope that they once again find their way to an on-call room, but for now, this is nice. Quan too seems to have mended whatever he may have messed up last week with Mohunty. Those two and their booty calls are going strong. Good for him. But Quan's not so swept up in his new situationship that he doesn't notice things are off with Jules. Remember when those two were in love with each other? It seems Quan is still a softie when it comes to Jules. Not only does he give up the race for a thrombectomy so that Jules has something to look forward to, but later he notices Jules staring longingly at Winston and realizes what her real problem is. It's Quan who tells her that Nurse Iris is merely a stop sign, not a roadblock, when it comes to her obvious feelings for Winston. He doesn't want her to give up. I do love when Quan is this sweet, but it is also deeply unsettling. Watching all her friends and her big-time crush enjoy their time with other people has Jules feeling down, and it certainly doesn't help when she once again gets saddled with a patient who comes in with some sort of relationship bent to their backstory. She always has to deal with the people who are incredibly in love. It's the universe just repeatedly hitting her over the head. When Jules meets Janet and her husband, Hal, who enjoy role-playing as doctor and patient, until Janet arrived at the hospital with a DVT and a need for an emergency thrombectomy. She's mostly confused about why they would need to pretend to be other people to be interested in the person they supposedly love. Jules is very judgy. But wouldn't you know it? At the end of a long day and another interaction with Winston in which they both clearly want to smash their faces into each other until Iris shows up, no shade, she seems nice, Jules is approached by a cute guy at Joe's, and instead of pushing him away, she invites him to sit down and introduces herself as Sally. Maybe role-playing to liven things up isn't so bad after all. On making mom friends. How about we end this recap with a quick check-in on our constantly beleaguered family of 6, the Lincoln Wilsons. Or the Wilson Lincolns. Have we landed on one of those yet? I am thrilled to tell you that Joe and Link have named their 2 new little ones, welcome to the world, Peyton and Hattie. Joe is on the mend, but it's been only 3 days since Winston had to adjust her pump lest she go into cardiac arrest, so while her heart is getting stronger, she's still being observed. The good news is she does get to spend time with her babies up in the NICU. The bad news is postpartum hormones are a bitch. Joe is crying all over the place, as is her right. After the things this woman has been through in this month alone, I'd be catatonic. Everything is turning Joe into a puddle, even a nice NICU mom named Gina, who refers to her as Peyton and Hattie's mom for the first time. The two women chat, Joe gives Gina some postpartum advice as a doctor, and Gina is thrilled to have her first real mom friend. It's very cute. And then Gina falls over and begins having a seizure on the NICU floor. Not so cute. Joe can't move out of her chair, but she flies into OB mode anyway. She can tell Gina is suffering from eclampsia, and if she can't follow her to the OB floor, she wants Link to be her proxy. From speakerphone, Joe demands that the intern put in charge of Gina's care administer magnesium to stop the symptoms. When he hesitates at her diagnosis of eclampsia, boy, does she ream that kid out. A glorious sight to see. Gina's going to be okay, thanks to Joe, who, yes, is still crying. She even takes Nurse Iris' head off when Iris refuses to violate HIPAA, and wishing she felt more like herself. She already misses not being able to be a real doctor at the moment. Sure, it's only temporary, and Joe will be back, but wow, is her maternity leave going to be a real doozy? Grey's Anatomy reveals Joe's side effects from premature C-section, offers update on her infants in NICU. You're a Grey's Anatomy official recap, Season 22, Episode 6. It's a busy day over at Grey Sloan Memorial as When I Crash gets underway. And doesn't that just feel right for our mid-season finale of Grey's Anatomy? Joe and Link and their babies are put in a precarious situation, Weber delivers some troubling news, and people who have never made out with each other before make out with each other. On an elevator, no less. It's a lot to chew on as we head into our winter hiatus. Let's talk about it. Choose your own adventure, Newborn Hellscape. At the end of last week's episode, when Joe noted that the way she was leaking wasn't normal, she was not kidding. At first, it seems like the babies are fine and the cervical circlage is holding, but things go off the rails quickly when she suddenly gets short of breath. To be safe, she wants cardio to check her out. If anyone knows how to advocate for a pregnant patient, it's Joe. Link doesn't get a hold of just any cardio doctor to run tests on his wife, he gets the cardio chief himself. Link going immediately to Winston to check on Joe is a telltale sign that Link is freaking out. A sign, as it turns out, that is quite necessary since Link and Joe have a major problem. Both are terrified about what's happening, but neither wants to stress the other out, so they're pretending everything is fine. This is a terrible tactic. Sure, they need to remain as calm as possible for Joe's and the baby's health, but pretending you're doing okay, as the news gets progressively worse, doesn't help anybody. This becomes especially true when Winston and Ben, who has an excellent poker face, by the way, finally inform Joe and Link what's going on. Joe has peripartum cardiomyopathy. Her heart is failing. Winston, who has no real OB experience, is about as calm a doctor as you could ask for at a time like this. At this point, Joe still has some options. First, she can take some medication that might prevent things from getting worse. If the meds don't work, there is a pump they could install directly into a ventricle, which would support the heart and give it time to recover. The pump, though not ideal, would give the babies more time in utero. They should have 7 more weeks. The nuclear option, of course, is an emergency C-section 7 weeks early. Sigh, we all know where this goes. When Link catches Winston and Ben alone, he asks them, as a friend, how worried should he be? The time for poker faces and pretending everything is just fine is over. This is serious, but they are watching it. Joe is their priority. It would be nice if an OB doctor could check on her. Where is Karina DeLuca when you need her? Still, the guys push on with their course of treatment. Did anyone actually think the meds were going to work? Things quickly take a turn. Joe's blood pressure drops dangerously low, and she's having even more trouble breathing. Ben and Winston rush Joe out to the OR to place the pump and, hopefully, stop her from crashing, just as Link walks in after making a call to check on the kids. It is chaos. The man is distraught. I'm starting to feel bad about how much I judged him for singing his vows. Sing your vows, dude. Sing whatever you want. Oh, did you think once Winston and Ben got Joe into the or things would be a breeze? You've never watched this show before, have you? Before Winston can do anything, the OB nurse says she's lost both fetal heart tones. The babies need to be delivered now. Unfortunately, no OBs are currently available, and this really isn't something you can table until someone's schedule clears up. Winston, who hasn't performed a C-section since med school, will have to deliver Joe's babies. He grabs a scalpel, and he makes the first cut. Push it. Push it real good. Worrying about Joe and her babies won't be the only development vexing Grey's Anatomy fans over the winter hiatus. Richard Webber is in trouble. And it all starts with Teddy finding Owen naked in bed with another woman. Well, sort of. You'll see. After Teddy and her kids walk in on Owen and Nora in bed in Owen's trailer, both the doctors happen to be in the area when a major, multiple motor vehicle accident leaves a cyclist trapped under a bus. Teddy and Owen get over their awkwardness to prevent Maisie from bleeding out right there on the street, even when it takes Teddy crawling under that unstable bus to place a tourniquet on Maisie's leg to stop said bleeding. Maisie is upset for so many reasons. Being trapped under a bus is probably, number one, including the fact that she and her boyfriend recently broke up over what now feels like a very stupid fight, and all she wants right now is to talk to him. This situation with Maisie is clearly supposed to parallel Teddy and Owen's situation. If it's not clear when they are trying to save Maisie's life, it should be when Teddy runs into that ex-boyfriend, who is in tears, asking if Maisie is okay, and is overwhelmed with regret for ever walking out on her. Are Teddy and Owen rushing to divorce when they might regret it? If something were to happen to either of them, wouldn't it be the other person they'd want with them? Teddy isn't convinced. Their situation is complicated, but staying together just isn't working. For her, this separation is hard, but it's right. All of which is to say, nothing has changed with Teddy and Owen. Well, one thing has changed. Nora officially puts a stop to whatever she and Owen were starting. She needs to rely on Teddy for her health, and getting in the middle of this divorce makes it too messy. So, Teddy and Owen are basically the same, except Owen is even sadder. What does all of this have to do with Webber? Well, another victim Owen and Teddy bring in from the pileup is Glenn, an aide to an autistic person named Aaron. Glenn's injuries are extensive, and his chance of survival is, let's call it, low. So low. But then, Webber arrives in the and swears they are going to save this man's life. When he has to tend to another patient, Bailey takes over, and it becomes clear to her that there is nothing more to do for Glenn. They need to call the time of death. Once again, Webber walks in just in time. They are not calling the time of death, they are going to save this man. Bailey disagrees, and stands there aghast that Webber would keep pushing this. But push he does. They open Glenn's chest and inject his heart with AP before doing chest compressions. They are not giving up. They are going to give Glenn everything they've got. Suddenly, he has a rhythm. Webber was right to push, he saved this man's life. After Bailey finishes fixing all of Glenn's injuries in the OR, she goes to apologize to her mentor and friend for fighting against him with this patient. Webber was right to fight for him. It's then that it becomes clear just why Webber was so desperate to save Glenn. Webber has just learned from his urologist that he has prostate cancer. He is about to be the patient. He will be entering his own fight and hoping that his doctors fight just as hard for him too. On your service. Thankfully, the Grey Sloan residents are having much better days than the attendings. It certainly doesn't start that way. Webber sends out an email informing all residents that they need to increase their caseloads by 10%. People are stressed, to say the least. Quan is eyeing one case he'd like to add to his load. Dr. Mohunty is scheduled to perform a tram flap later that day, and he wants in. Mohunty is worried that if she agrees, she'll look like she's favoring him, especially since she just told Lucas no when he asked to join her in the OR. Alas, Quan is her favorite. She cannot resist the Quan charm, and we ask, who can? So, she makes him a deal. If he can place a wound vac on her 80-year-old patient Frank, he can have the surgery. The catch? The ulcer that they are trying to keep clean and let heal is right next to the anus, and this has made it impossible for anyone else to properly place it. But what's a little anus-adjacent ulcer to Kwon when a coveted surgery is on the line? Kwon enlists Lucas and his intern for the day, Danny. You remember her from the season premiere. Meredith had to operate on her in the clinic, without telling his friend that he'll get the surgery Lucas wanted if they get this wound vac sorted out. However, Frank, the grumpiest old man to ever grump, spills the beans, and Lucas rescinds his offer to help. Danny stays to help Kwon, but soon he's called away to the wound vac can't be placed, and Frank will need an ostomy to give that ulcer a chance to heal. Frank pretends like he's not upset by this news, but it's clear to Danny that he is. It's Danny who convinces Lucas to go back and try the wound vac again, thanks to a heartfelt speech about taking an oath to heal people. Frank is old, and an ostomy could come with a lot of problems. They owe it to him to at least try. We all know that behind that brooding face, Lucas is a softie, and so off he goes back to the anus ulcer. He does ultimately place the wound vac, but he also pretty curtly dismisses Danny while doing it. But again, the guy is all heart, and when Mohunty offers him the tram flap, he asks if Danny can scrub in too. Don't feel too bad for Kwon though. He bumps into Mohunty on the elevator, wink wink, and informs her that he's not torn up about losing out on the surgery. He knows there will be more surgeries. When he wants something bad enough, he will do everything in his power to get it. It's Mohunty who asks if a tram flap surgery is all he wants. His answer? He stops the elevator, and they furiously make out. I told you Kwon was her favorite. If the elevators take the top spot in the Grey Sloan hotbeds of sexual tension rankings, supply closets have to be a close number 2. They certainly make a run for number 1 in this episode. Today, Wes is put on Simone's service, because of course he is. The two of them wind up being put on errand duty. When the ambulance pulls up with Glenn, a distressed Aaron runs out and away from the hospital. Simone and Wes track him down to a nearby park bench. Aaron is nonverbal, and he's clearly agitated, but he has a head lack they'd like to get a closer look at. It's Wes who winds up finding a way to bond with Aaron over basketball and their bad experiences with hospitals. Wes' younger brother has epilepsy, and eventually Wes is able to convince Aaron to come inside the hospital with him. It's still a bit of a tag team effort for Wes and Simone to actually clean the head lack, but Simone is impressed by not just Wes' bedside manner. When he turns down a chance to place a chest tube to stay with Aaron, she is also moved by his ability to put patient care over getting the flashier procedure. Tensions seem to have softened between Simone and Wes, and he notices it too. It is, perhaps, why he makes a little move on her when they find themselves alone in the supply closet. She is very clear that her compliments were not an opening for something to happen between them, again. It is also very clear that the tensions between them have moved from the angry kind to the other, much more fun kind. The supply closet doesn't get any play today, but don't count it out just yet. Sadly, we now must wait a few weeks for Grey's Anatomy to return, but it won't be too long. On January 8, 2026, on ABC, we'll all be ready to scrub in, and if the writers are listening, Joe Link better be holding their healthy baby girls. Your official Grey's Anatomy recap, Season 22, Episode 5. As our omnipotent overlord Meredith Grey informs us in this week's voiceover on Grey's Anatomy, there's always one patient who can change everything for a doctor, someone who leaves them with a change in perspective or with whom they have a powerful emotional connection. And based on Simone's, Kwon's, and Joe's experiences in Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, Mare is proved correct. Isn't she always? Simone's taking a ride on a real roller coaster of emotions. What a way to end a shift, huh? Simone is almost ready to wrap things up and hand off her patients to Lucas, but when Lucas is late, Aunt Amelia is in Boston, apparently, so there's no one to kick him out the door. Weber assigns Simone to do the workup on recently transferred patient Regina Evans, who is suffering from congestive heart failure, renal failure, and hospital-acquired pneumonia. She is annoyed at first by her ex's tardiness, but that changes when Simone notices that one of Regina's personal photos she has set up around the room is of Simone's mother, Denise. Simone is obviously taken aback. Not only is she meeting someone who knew her mother better than almost anyone, but Regina, also pretty shocked to be face to face with her best friend's daughter, starts telling her stories of their crazy, rebellious teenage years, such as sneaking pot into a concert by A Tribe Called Quest and staying all night, only to receive some serious lectures from Mama Joyce, Simone's granny. Simone's overwhelmed with conflicting emotions. Her father always described her mother as a serious, straight-A student, and now she's learning that wasn't the full story. It's as if she's getting to know her mother for the first time. As is tradition at Gray Sloan Memorial, the situation with Regina gets much more complicated. She has an aneurysm. It's not emergent, they schedule a surgery to remove it the next day, but it is concerning. Still, the wait gives Simone and Regina more time to chat, and before long, Simone confesses that she and her sister aren't close because Ebony blames her for their mother's death. Simone blames herself too. She made her mother a statistic, she tells Regina. Regina rejects all of this, of course, it wasn't Simone's fault, but she understands the weight of that guilt. She's been carrying it around too. Toward the end of Denise's pregnancy, Regina got a dream offer to study at a prestigious culinary institute in Paris. She was going to wait until after Denise gave birth, but Denise told her to go. If she had been there, maybe she would have pushed harder for the doctors to pay attention to what was happening. She begs Simone to let her carry that burden of guilt and to go live her life to the fullest. It's what her mother would have wanted. Just as they are having this emotional breakthrough, Regina's oxygen drops, she codes, and as hard as Simone and Lucas fight to bring her back, there is nothing they can do. Regina dies, and Simone is left devastated. If we're looking for any sort of silver lining to Simone's wild and emotional few hours, it could be that seeing how hurt Simone is after losing Regina and how overwhelmed she is after so many of her mommy issues are stirred up, Lucas remembers that despite the breakup of their relationship, he still cares about her. He takes some time off from his brood-a-thon to offer her a ride home. She declines, but the fact that he offers, that he has softened his steely post-breakup feelings, is a sign that maybe these two can find a way to get along again. Kwan's doing house calls now. If there's one thing we know that will stand the test of time with this generation's batch of young Grey's Anatomy residents, it is that Benson Kwan will forever and always have a soft spot for single moms. We mean that in an empathetic, typically medical-related way, or maybe not. You never know. That is what happens when, during a shift at the clinic, he realizes that a patient, Mercedes Hernandez, has been a no-show at multiple appointments, and this time she hasn't bothered to even call and reschedule. Mercedes, who has PCOS and diabetes, has also missed her prescription refill, and without keeping her blood sugar in check, she's at risk for a whole lot of complications. Something about it just doesn't sit right with Kwan, and as the clinic closes down for the night, he decides to make a little house call and brings Jules, who really just needed a ride home after a long day, along for the ride. Kwan has a spidey sense that lets him know when single moms are in trouble. When he and Jules arrive at Mercedes' house, she can't even get up from her couch, and her mother and young son Javi are scared. When Kwan sees that not only does she need an insulin shot but that she also has a nasty diabetic infection on her foot that has made one of her toes necrotic to the point that it falls off her foot when touched, he wants to get her to the hospital before she loses her whole leg. Mercedes refuses. She's heard there are ICE agents waiting around the hospital, she's had a cousin taken off the street, and she has no idea where they've put him. Her status was revoked just a few months ago, and now she's terrified that she'll disappear too. She is so scared, she won't leave her house even if it means putting her life at risk. It is infuriating. Kwan calls for backup, and Bailey arrives with a fully stocked ambulance so that they can treat Mercedes right outside of her house. Bailey and Kwan are able to save Mercedes' foot and make her promise to have someone pick up her meds from now on. But just because there's a happy ending medically speaking, it doesn't mean Bailey isn't upset. She's angry that this is the current state of things, in which people are going to die because they are living in fear that they'll be ripped away from their families. It's cruel, she says. It's inhumane. She's also not just a little bit annoyed that Kwan and Jules went rogue with a patient. She's proud of them for going above and beyond but reminds them this is a fireable offense, if she wanted it to be. For now, it'll just be a warning with a big ol' thank you attached.
Ah.
Bailey, always with the salty and the sweet. Hey, on the less life-threatening end of things, Jules winds up spending a lot of time with Mercedes' young son Javi and his velociraptors, Benito and Josh. Javi, like many kids in his situation, is scared every day that his mom might be taken away from him. His velociraptors give him comfort, and it's a comfort he wants to pass on to Jules to thank her for staying with him through the scary parts, and so he gives her Josh on her way out. Jules, in turn, offers Josh to Winston when she runs into him at the hospital and finds him stressed about presenting Nora Young's surgery to a room full of people. He, of course, turns her down since he's an adult and all, but still, he appreciates the thought. And we know this because that man can't keep his eyes off Jules as she walks away. Josh the Velociraptor knows what's up, and so do we. Joe and Amy and Kevin. Joe Wilson finds herself dealing with two stubborn people, who both, as it turns out, have very good reasons for digging into their opinions. Link, still recovering from his near-death experience, is out of sorts because his mother is pushing him to get the twins baptized once they're born. Link isn't religious, and he doesn't want to baptize his kids into a religion he doesn't believe in. Scout's not baptized either. Joe doesn't mind the idea of getting the kids baptized, and in a surprise to everyone including Link and all of us in the audience, Joe is kind of religious. She's never once hinted at this before, but she seems adamant when she tells Link about a nearby Korean church she would go to for meals as a teenager and how she was jealous of the community people formed there. She tells him how she prayed when he was hurt, and it brought her comfort. It's all well and good but does feel a little out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Link, just as confused as the rest of us, tells his wife about a church group who would visit him and the other kids in the cancer ward when he was young and make sure they knew God was watching over them. Even as a kid, Link questioned how this could be true if children were dying. And he certainly doesn't see God in what's happening in the world now with the planet burning and people starving. He hated it when that group came around. He also reminds Joe that there are other ways you can find your community. Thanks for watching this videos. Please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.